Hi, thanks for joining us on Moving Forward. Today we're going to be looking at women in the workforce and what keeps women from realizing their dreams. And we are focusing also on the idea of women having it all. Is this a question just for privileged women, or are women really in the workforce losing it all? And today I'm really lucky to have two people to talk about this magazine cover and the whole issue. It's been causing quite a buzz in the community. The first I'd like to introduce is Dr. Katie Kanagawa. She teaches in the Women's Gender and Studies Department at San Francisco State. She also works independently as a feminist, blogger, and media critic. She has an article coming out this fall in the Film Studies Journal called Black Camera. And it's going to be on Precious, the 2009 film by Lee Daniels. That sounds great. Thank you so much, Katie, for coming down today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Okay, and we're also going to be joined by Jessica DeGroot, who will be on the telephone from Philadelphia. She's the president and founder of Third Path Institute, an organization whose goal it is to assist individuals, families, organizations in finding new ways to redesign work to create more time for family, community, and other life priorities. So this is something I think that affects everyone, and something that I think is really vital, because we need to find ways that working parents can be supported. We also need to start to consider, are women being forced into having children? You know, and what ways is the culture making it essentially impossible for her not to choose childlessness? And then if she does choose to have a child, why does she have to choose between a career and a child? Because these aren't the kind of decisions that often men have to make, those same kind of choices. So we're going to be looking at work options, ideas about sick pay for women, which is really important because so many women living in poverty. And so clearly, this is something I want to really go into. Let's talk about how the media is framing it, though, because what was so interesting was how they framed it, even in that video that they did. Mm-hmm. And they called it "Have Feminists Sold Young Women a Fiction," which is kind of like, you know, as if feminists, first of all, are this huge monster kind of thing that can have so much clout politically, and it's just not so.
No.
Could you speak about that?
I completely agree that it's just not so, right? I mean, Slaughter in her article, Why Women Still Can't Have It All, you know, I think she's right when she points out that it's really the way that our American economy is structured right now, and the ways that we cleave or like kind of, you know, cling on to these kind of antiquated ideas of what work is and what it looks like. That's really the source, I think, of the problems and the struggles to achieve kind of a work-life balance or equal satisfaction in work and home life. I don't think it's feminism, and I agree that it's that's giving feminism kind of a lot of clout. Feminism, you know, it gives us a vision to fight for, a vision of equality, right? I mean, and it's given us something to work for and a vision of how things should be. I don't think it's feminism's fault that hasn't been achieved yet.
Right, and if you frame it like that, then it automatically is like, this bad guy. They've promised you can have everything, and now you can't have everything. See, we told you so. Yeah. And it's kind of, I mean, it's not as if, you know, as if women have ever had it all. We don't have it all. I mean, I know I didn't have it all. Trying to choose between family. I have one son. He's 22 now, and it was always a struggle. It's always a struggle trying to figure out how do you balance it. Who does what? What is equality? And so I'm thinking, you know, women have a kind of impossible tightrope to walk too often, and that they're in their leadership roles. They're not valued for this task of childcare. And yet, how do we make that job something that we rever as a community, and we hold up and we say, yes, this is really vital. This is important to all of us. And I thought it was interesting in that book about 5 reasons, people's regrets after dying. What was the woman's name? Bonnie Ware, I think. Bonnie Ware's book, Top 5 Regrets of Dying. The thing she heard from all her male patients: I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I spent more time with my family and I got to know my companion. And so I think, that's pretty vital. I wish we could make that front page news, make that the cover story of.
Well, and I think it's especially difficult for women. It's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, the question of, I wish I hadn't lived according to the expectations of others. I mean, so for my own life, I'm trying not to live to the kind of common gendered expectations or like gender roles or like kind of the, the stereotypical kind of like iconic visions of women. Like women is like, as housewife, you see these kind of iconic representations. So there's that side of it, but I'm also, on the other hand, thinking about living up to the expectations of other women, right? According to Slaughter too. Okay, that I have it all, right? That expectation that I'm able to negotiate that tricky path and somehow find a way to have both.
Right.
So it's like a double-edged kind of expectation, especially as being a woman.
Exactly. And Marissa Miller recently becoming the CEO of Yahoo, and everybody's talking about the fact that she is 7 months pregnant. Oh my God, how will she balance this? How impossible, and how could it be done? And, childbirth is taxing. It's rough, but it's certainly not something that you have to give up everything and that you can't focus still. And you do have a life still. I mean, it's interesting how everybody's talking about, gee, she's so young and she's 7 months pregnant. And anyway, I think that's interesting though, because I guess what also was a really big part of this was this: is it privileged that that we even have this discussion about having it all, when so many women in this particular economic climate are really facing terrible poverty and extraordinary hardship. What is it? 4 million more women than men are living in poverty. And this is extraordinary, and this is really something I think we need to address if we're as feminists and as women who are trying to find shared ways to make the world a better place and find equality. And
I appreciate that about the way, especially like kind of feminist publications have responded to the article. They've been sort of deconstructing and questioning that very old kind of idea of having it all and what it means, and can it mean the same thing for all women and men everywhere. And some of the responses online and on Twitter and everything have been like, oh, having a cup of coffee and a full tank of gas, having it all. Yeah. Right, and then there was one author who was talking about the decision not to have kids at all as kind of her experience of having it all. So I think that, that's a great kind of line of questioning that has arisen from this context.
Yes, and I think I wanted to just also mention that article from the Harvard Business Review. It was Executive Women and the Myth of Having It All. And the way she writes it is as if a third and a half of all successful career women do not have children. And these women have not chosen to remain childless. How does she know that? Does she really ask them? I mean, I really kind of doubt that, because I have always felt that there wasn't really enough room for women to choose not to have children, and we're in a climate where they can't get birth control. Right. They're not getting the services where we can actually have it. So let's go ahead and have Jessica DeGroot join us, because we are so lucky to have Jessica with us. She's committed to helping parents and employees at all stages in their careers to create a kind of win-win situation. She's the founder and president of Third Path Institute. Jessica, are you there?
I sure am, Anne.
Oh,
I'm so pleased
great.
to be here.
I'm so glad you joined us today. I think your perspective will really help us wrangle with this topic.
Yes, terrific.
So can you just start off with giving us an overview of the services that Third Path provides?
Yeah, sure. Well, our name, Third Path, means that people don't have to choose work or family, work or taking care of an aging parent, work or community involvement. They can find this third or integrated path. And we work on both the family side of things, helping families or couples think about how they can do work differently so they have time and energy to care for their children. We also work on the business side of things, working with leaders of small, mid-sized, or large organizations to help them think about how can we really create a workplace that supports our best employees to be able to be successful at work but also have time for their lives outside of work.
And so how do they? How can we do that?
Well, again, you have to look at it both sides, the family side and the work side.
Yeah.
We could look at we know a lot about helping couples think about this model we call shared care, where they really think about how they both can look at the type of work that they do, whether they're a bus driver or an executive, and they can think about, given the type of work we each do, how could we change it around so it doesn't take up all of our time and energy, but instead it's something that provides us the income we need, but also allows us to then have time to care for our kids. So, for example, one couple we know worked both a 4-day work week so that they could each have 1 day with their kid and only need to use 3 days with childcare. And they've done this now for 15 years and learned that, yes, they did it originally for the kids, but it turns out it really helped them build a very strong relationship with each other as partners. Or we could look on the work side of things. We've really done a lot of work over the last 6 years helping leaders model an integrated career path, because if you get men and women at the top showing us that they can be successful at work but also take time for their families, it means that they are signaling to the rest of the organization that this is really an okay approach. We even had leaders who started their own organizations with this exact philosophy, including this one person who runs a 25-person law firm, and he's figured out how to create a workplace where everybody, himself included, the administrative people, anybody, has been able to figure out a flexible approach that has success at work and success in life outside of work as their goals.
You know, and Jessica, hi, this is Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Hi. You know, I'm really interested and so into when you're talking about how it has to be, like, shared care has to be something where, I mean, both men and women are looking at their, you know, their work lives, and you know, because both men and women are struggling, right, with kind of a desire to have it all, to have home and family life. And you know, one thing that we've sent in our conversations online, this quote just keeps coming back to me, and I just love it. And it was, I think it's by Joan Williams, and it says, masculinity and the ideal worker must be redefined to include success at work and success in our lives as parents, lovers, community members, and friends. And I just love that quote, and I think it's something really important to work for.
Yes, it says it all, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, yeah.
Well, I mean, how do we get men on board? I mean, I couldn't get my husband on board.
That's a good question.
I mean,
well,
you know.
I think, Anne, the most important thing for men and women to remember is that, you know, there is an answer out there, and yes, there's going to be some cases when it doesn't work, but to learn a lot from the cases where it does work. There was one really wonderful story we learned from a young couple, both engineers, and when she was trying to figure out, she was pregnant with her first child and trying to figure out how she was going to set things up so she had time for work and time for family. She didn't even think about talking to her husband. Did he want to play a role? It was actually the husband who brought it up when she was saying, you know, I can't figure out what we're going to do. He said, well, why aren't you including me in this discussion? I'd like to spend time with the baby. So I think sometimes, not always, it's women remembering to include men in the conversation. And again, I understand not all men are going to be signing up for this, but I think when we really include them in the process and see them as part of the whole picture, we're going to have a lot more success.
I mean, just personally, you know, my husband he liked to do the fun things, but he didn't like to do he didn't like to make the dental appointments. It's interesting. I mean, when you really are wrangling with this, it's kind of like also this idea of flex time. We can create new and different work environments. I think that's terrific, but, you know, if you're a maid in a hotel, good luck. You know, you are a cashier, you can't, you know, your boss is not going to give you flex time. So what can we learn, and what have you learned from people of lower socioeconomic situations? Well,
again, thank you for reminding us that the first thing we have to look at, and we do this with any individual or couple we work with, is to look at the type of work they do, because you're right. Maybe for some jobs there might not be ease in flexing, to work from home or something like that. But each job has a different solution. So we go back to that guy who runs this 25-person law firm. He's figured out how to offer flexibility across the board because there's a different solution for different jobs. So the administrative person needs to be there Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They can't work from home because, given the type of work they do, having them physically present at the same time that everybody else is working is critical. But the administrative people could set up a job share. So you have to look at the different solutions for the different type of work. And, actually you gave an example of somebody working in a hotel. On our Thursdays with Third Path calls, these are calls where we kind of show some model examples from people and workplaces. We actually had someone from Marriott who was their work-life manager speak about how Marriott has worked very hard to create flexibility given the needs of the business. And they have this very cool policy of setting up something where people can say that they can't get to work because of a sick child, and then they have a text system that goes out to the wide network of other people to see if somebody will take on that extra shift. So a progressive employer can really work in a smart way to support all types of jobs to have flexibility.
And that I also noticed when I was looking at the thirdpath.org website that there was actually like a kind of a worksheet that you can download. It's like a PDF, and it kind of leads you through a set of questions. And the website definitely is kind of pointing to that there will be no kind of one-size-fit-all kind of solution to the issue, that it would have to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And so, the form kind of lists a set of questions like, okay, so what kind of work do you do? How much flexibility is there in your schedule? And I think it was something like 5 or 6 questions that I would recommend.
Thanks, Katie. You're right. We try to have a lot of free resources on our website to get people started, whether it's trying to think about how to redesign their jobs or how to really set up a shared care solution. Or let's say you want to move ahead into a leadership job. We've got some great information about how you can be a leader and also model this flexibility, including a great story about, you can read about Ivan, who is a grandfather who works a 4-day work week so he can be in charge of his grandchild, and he's a COO at an organization. So there's just really wonderful examples out there.
Yeah, I can see how it has to come from the top down, and I see what you mean. If the management is on board and they're actually sending out texts to help with a sick child, because oftentimes that's the kind of horror of a restaurant worker. Say, for example, last minute they're vomiting. Do you want them in there serving food? No, you don't want them serving food. But if they can't find anybody to cover it, it becomes a real issue for so many people. So having it be from the top down, what's your thought about, or can you tell us a little bit more about the phone calls that you do? Because I think the third Thursdays, is that what you call them?
Thursdays with Third Path, and we have them, they start every fall, so once again will start up again in October, and they're free and open to the public, where you can see our schedule ahead of time and see what's coming down the path. But we actually have some that we were showing from last year, that a little picture of what was happening last year, where you can call in and hear about men who've redesigned their jobs, and some wonderful stories about how this gives men so many benefits, because they don't have to feel like they're the sole provider for their family, or they don't feel like they can't move away from a job that maybe is less supportive, and they get more time to be involved with their kids. Or whether it's, more of a public policy perspective. We did actually have Joan Williams on one of our calls speaking about some of these very progressive ideas out there that are happening in workplaces today. So a real range of calls that are out there.
I had just a couple of questions here. I wonder, Jessica, are you seeing through your work like a growing demand among men and women for greater work-life balance? And then are you seeing also a level of cooperation among bosses and employers? I mean, that's kind of like the question that emerges in my mind is how many employers would be willing to kind of like negotiate in this way, because it seems so novel or so kind of radical, of an idea. Yeah.
Well, I think what we're seeing is that there definitely is a growing demand. And what's, I think, really going to help this change happen is it's not just women who are asking for this change now. There's a growing demand from young dads who feel both a desire to be more involved at home, but also the stress of trying to be the parent who is coming home and helping out, sharing the second shift, and how that can be exhausting for families. So I think it's both men and young men are asking for these changes. And you're right, Katie. I think that most employers still probably are pretty old school, like dinosaurs. Maybe they're going to be a little extinct over time around some of this stuff. But there is a growing number of employers, and more importantly, there's a growing number of managers, because you're not necessarily going to negotiate with the whole organization. You're going to negotiate with your boss. And what we, again, try to teach people is go in and look for that win-win solution. Don't go in and say, this is what I need. Instead, go in and say, here's why this will work for you, and I'll be able to get the work done, and it'll be fine for the people I work with and the clients I work with. And that's what you have to start with, is to help them understand this is going to work for them and work for you. We have an amazing story recently of a job share managers pretty high up in Ford Motor Company. And basically they have, as a job share, set it up where they couldn't have people have to repeat stories twice, to first one person and then the next person the next day. So instead they worked out a process between the two of them to share information about what happened the day before, so that it was seamless for people, whoever they were working with. And that's what's really going to make it work in more and more workplaces, is that the employee gets smart about how to go in and look for that win-win solution.
And maybe one of the most important things that I'm going to take away from this conversation too is that, I mean, we have to know what we want and what we need personally and professionally, and be willing to ask for it.
Yes, I think absolutely, Katie. If there was one other thing I was going to encourage people to think about, is to sometimes if they get, they don't think enough in advance about the power of being proactive around spending. A number of the couples we've worked with, the one I mentioned early on, who both worked a 4-day work week, they knew to go ahead and buy a house that they could afford on one income, even though they both planned to work, because that meant that they had more flexibility. In contrast, we're working with a couple right now where they ended up getting kind of stuck in what we call the golden handcuffs. One of their jobs paid a lot of money, but it demanded a lot of hours. And so they had to kind of figure out how to change their spending around so they could say goodbye to that job that was demanding too much of them. So absolutely, get clear about your goals. Go ahead and try to look for that win-win solution. Take a little risk there, but also be thoughtful that, spending less might mean having more time.
Yeah, and is there any kind of summary kind of statement that you could make, Jessica, because we're getting a little short on time here, and also just success that, what are the statistics, how can some of the statistics of the work that's been done, the studies that have been done around this issue that can show us this is the shared working within partnership really works. It makes for more intimacy in the relationship. It makes for happier children. Mm-hmm. What kind of studies do you have?
Well, I think one of the more interesting statistics that came out in the New York Times recently was the power of two-parent households and how that really made a difference in the future success of children. And I'm not saying that single-parent households can't also have wonderful success. In fact, we have presidents from single-parent households. But I think what we're seeing today is that the stress of two people working a lot can fall out in a way where people end up getting frustrated at home. And so one of the biggest powerful things that I think happens when people approach this from a shared care perspective is that instead of them taking the stress out at home, they learn to work as a team at home, and it really creates a healthier marriage that I think is the future of what we really want to see in families. Families where they can really take care of their kids, but also take care of the relationship with each other. So I feel like that's really where we're going, is creating a future marriage, a future household where parents can really have time for each other and time for their kids, and that's going to be in the long run a really healthy model for all of us. As far as last words, I think one of the things that's been most interesting as I've observed this unfold over the last 12 years in the work we've done is that just as I discovered in my own life, yeah, I did this to kind of help figure out a good solution for the children. But again, what I really didn't know was it was a great solution for my relationship with my spouse. And that it's created tools that I can use for a lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm watching my parents get older, and I can think about how to kind of redesign my work to take care of aging parents, too.
Oh, that's great. What about you, Katie? Is there any kind of summary that you'd like to?
You know, I would just like to say how grateful I am to have an opportunity and a space to talk about these issues. I think that's probably one of the most important things that Slaughter's article has accomplished, is beginning this conversation. And, you know, I'm as a woman in my early 30s and somebody who's always envisioned myself having a very successful career and a successful personal life, I completely relate to, I mean, the feelings of shame and the feelings of sacrifice and failure even when I try to turn my focus in either one direction and the other seems to suffer.
Yeah.
So I just would love to encourage us to continue having this kind of conversation in an open and productive way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
And thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, Anne.
I'd just like to say, as a media activist, in order for all of us to kind of wake up to the fact that women still do 2/3 of the household work and childcare, that maybe we could take a day off and we could just show everybody, you know, how valuable we really are. I think actions like that sometimes can really make a difference. So I'm really grateful that we've been able to have this conversation too. I think it's long overdue, and we have to keep our channels of communication open. Thank you for joining us today on Moving Forward, and I look forward to having you on another show. We'll be having more coming up. Thanks.
We are going, heaven knows how we are going, but we know with him that we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get